All right, great. So today is Monday, July 12th. We've been talking about CRUD concepts. So that's something we talked about on Friday. We're going to kind of go over that again and make sure we understand how to create, retrieve, update, and delete data from our application, and also talk about some other Django tools, namely Django model forms, which make it easier for us to accomplish CRUD capabilities. But let's back up a day in the curriculum. So that's going to be week 6, and I think that was the 2nd. All right, so Friday, we went over CRUD. We introduced kind of how to set up a CRUD application. We're going to be going over that a bit more today. The challenge from 2 Fridays ago was event calendar. So let me bring that up here. And let's give it a gander. So event calendar, we actually have a Django project created for you. So you're not going to have to create it from scratch. But we're just going to go through the motions, make sure we understand how to set up our environment, and then we're going to go into creating the application. All right, so let's go through our motions here. I'm going to fork it over to my personal account. That should take a quick second. Once it's done, I can grab the URL here. All right, that's copied. Let's go to my bash over here. So I'm going to do git clone, paste the URL I just copied, and that should be done. All right, and let's get into that folder. So that's Django events calendar, and let's open a VS Code here. All right, that pops up. I like switching to a new desktop here, so I'm just going to move it over so that we code on this screen. All right, so as mentioned, this is a case where we've given you the Django project that already exists, so you don't have to create one from scratch, but there are a few steps that we need to do here to get it up and running. So as always, I love chatting with you guys. So let's talk to Eric Berger. How can I get started with my Django code that I just checked out here? You might be muted, I think.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Absolutely, yep, no problem at all. Yep.
I was gonna say create a database.
Yep, that is one thing we do need to do. So yeah, let's do that right now. But so if I go to my settings file, if we look at what database by default we've coded up. So again, you can change this, but looking at the settings file, it looks like we're using a Postgres database, and the database should be named Django event calendar. So Eric suggests we create it, and that would definitely be something we need to do. So I'm going to copy that, create DB, and then just the database name. So Django event calendar. All right. So no errors were shown in my terminal here. So it looks like that got created successfully. All right, cool.
We need to do a virtual environment too. Sorry.
No problem. No need to apologize. But yeah, usually the first step I do is create that virtual environment. Just get that out of the way. But again, you can create your database. That can be done separately from your virtual environment. That is not reliant on your virtual environment. But yeah, let's create a virtual environment here. So to do that, I'm going to do python-m VNV, and then I'm going to name my VNV. Again, my default is .vnv. You guys might have other default names you guys like to use, so kind of dealer's choice there. So I create my virtual environment. Notice again in my file explorer in my VS Code, a VNV folder got created. So that's where all the good stuff is kind of located. Usually you're not going to need to manually go through this or do anything with these files. So I'm not going to mess with that folder. All right, so I created my virtual environment. Jeremiah, how do I actually use my virtual environment?
You'll need to activate it. So you do source VNV/bin/activate.
Yep, you got it. Glad to know that you guys didn't forget all the steps here over break. So I do my virtual environment name, the binary folder or the bin folder, and then activate. So that should get me into my virtual environment. Again, looking at my prompt here, notice that's prepended with my virtual environment name. All right. Okay, so we created our virtual environment. We created our database already. We're in our virtual environment. Alex Saunders, how do I actually get this project that I just checked out kind of up and running. What's something else I guess I need to do here?
You have to install Django and PsychoPG too.
Yep.
You can do that in one line.
So given that we already created this project, what's I guess a key step that we can do instead of manually installing those components ourselves, or I guess going through the install ourselves?
A requirement.
Yep. Yeah. So we have this requirements.txt. Again, this is just something when you create a project, you should almost always create a requirements.txt so that anyone else using a project doesn't have to figure out, hey, what libraries does this project depend on? Again, in this case, yeah, it's Django and PsychoPG, but you might have installed like a third-party library that your particular project uses. Your user shouldn't have to like kind of guess and like run your project and get errors and figure out, okay, I need, third-party library, whatever you want to name it, in here. So in this case, yeah, we do have a requirements.txt, so we can kind of leverage that and install from this file. I think it was Tim that mentioned the requirements.txt. How do I actually use this file to install all these items? I think that was Tim, but maybe.
Yeah, that I forgot.
Don't
That
you have
was
to-
like. Oh, go ahead. Sean.
Isn't it something with the pip installment?
Yep. You guys are.
PIP install -r, then requirements.
Yep, you got it. So -r, I think that stands for read. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll just use that in my head to remember that -r is reading a file, and then you want to type in the file here. So one thing to notice, I just kind of noticed right now, is that we actually have a nested folder here. So looking here, so we do have a requirements.txt here, so we could use that. But notice for our Django project, we actually have two levels here. Event calendar and events is our Django project that's nested in our events calendar folder. Okay, so requirements.txt, I ran the command that Stephen told us about. So pip install -r and then the file. So this is going to read the file and install all the libraries in there. So if you kind of look at this summary here, installed PsychoPG, installed Django, and then some other libraries that were dependent for those. All right, great. So we've got our Django project, or all of our libraries installed. So let's, I think that's all we need to do. So our settings file, just want to make sure everything else is there. I would assume that whoever created this project did all the steps, but yep. So one thing I want to verify is that my app folder is listed in my installed app. So it looks like events is my app folder. So again, looking at our structure here, we have event calendar. That looks like our Django project folder. And then events is our application folder. All right, so that can check that off mentally that, that's been added. Again, our database we created that. So that's checked off also. Okay, I think that's all we needed. Does anyone else kind of remember any other steps that might be needed here? Okay, so again, we've coded some of this for you already. So looking at our models, that's usually where I like to start off, just to understand what structures I'll be working with. We have an events model that's been created. So in this case, we have a few fields like the name of the event, description, when it starts, ends, and what date it was created. All right, so it looks like we have that good to go. What else? So let's look at our URLs. So this is how we route the user request to our logic here. So let me get rid of this commenting. I always don't like excessive commenting there. All right, looks like that, we've already coded that URL path. So again, this is in our Django project folder. There's a urls.py, and that has a route for when the user goes to events or /events, they will be routed to events.urls. But now if I look at my events folder, I don't have a URLs file created. So by default, that's something you had to create. So let's go about creating that URLs file. So I'm gonna go to my application folder, create a new file here. I'm gonna call it urls.py. And I'm going to copy my settings or my project URLs and get started there. So in this case, I don't need admin, get rid of that. I create my own paths here, and I'll have some logic that goes there. So I'm just gonna clean this up a bit. Any questions about what we've done so far with the URLs or setting up the Django project?
Is it too late to run your server?
Is it too late?
Wait, sorry, is it too early?
Good question. Let's actually try to run our server, see if it lets us. So I'm gonna actually just delete my URL pass because I don't want to have anything there right now. Let's see if we can get our server running. So John, how do I actually start my server here?
Python manage run server, right? Or the managed that
Yep.
one, yes.
You're right. But again, I need to make sure I'm in the right folder. So right now I'm in my top level, which has all these items. I need to cd into my event calendar folder. And then here, there's the manage.py. So I think I'm in my right folder now. So I could do, as John said, Python manage.py and run server. Okay, so it looks like we got some errors. So it looks like it was not ready to run. Let's see. It can be kind of hard to read errors, but you kind of want to just look at the, usually the bottom line and start backwards. So if I scroll down to the bottom, let's see what it said. It said, yeah, so I deleted my URLs pattern. So that was my bad. If I go back here, let's just have an empty URLs pattern. So it's looking for something called URL patterns in my URLs file. So if I save that, okay, so my server is up. So to answer John's question, yes, it looks like we could run our server. Again, obviously our application doesn't really have anything, but if I actually navigate to this path or this URL, so let me copy this. Let's bring up a window. Let's see, on a new Google Chrome window. There you are. Make that a little bigger. Okay, so I'm just gonna go to my where my server is running. So that's localhost, or I guess 127.0.0.1 in my case. And then the port is 8,000. Again, the default port is 8,000. You can run it on a different port. You can have multiple servers running from different projects. If I go there, I get an error, which seems bad, but that's actually fine. This is what Django, this is a Django generated error page and saying, hey, you're trying to navigate to some path that I don't have a definition for. But Django's kind of nice and tells you, I do have some URL paths that I know about. One is /admin, or I guess admin /, and the other is events. And that events is what we listed in our project URLs, right? So this /events, you can name it whatever you want. There's nothing in Django that says, hey, this needs to match your app name. So in this case, our app folder is called events, and coincidentally, we have named our URL path with events, but this can be named, something or whatever you want it to be. But in this case, we'll leave it untouched. All right, so if we go to /events here, then we get another error. So this events is trying to get some definition for it, but we haven't defined anything in our URL patterns right now. So let's actually get to adding some definition here. So in here, I'll do path, and then the relative path here. So I'm just going to leave that blank for my homepage. And let's create views.index, and we'll give that a name. So the name will be, let's just say index. All right, so I need to create something in my views.url that's going to be called index. So let's get our import here from, what is it? Events.views. Sorry, from events, import views. All right, so now I'm importing my views, so it should know anything that's in my views.url. But right now, if I look at my views.py, there's nothing here. All right, and notice my console down here is generating some errors, so that Django kind of automatically refreshes anytime you, I think, make changes to your models.py, your URLs.py, and maybe your views.py. Your server's going to kind of reboot, and it's going to try to run it again. So in this case, we got an error saying, hey, your views module has nothing called index. And that's correct, because I have not created that index method here. I guess I should call it a function. So here, I'm going to create a function called index. Again, by default, that needs to take in a request object. So I'll call it requests, just to make that easy to understand. And here, I just return, I guess in this case, I could pass it. So if I run that, notice that my server is back up and running. So if I go to Since I'm not returning anything, so let's return something useful. Let's go Django, we get HTTP, import HTTP response. All right, so this HTTP response just lets us quickly pass back something to the user. So the response, this takes in, I think, a request object, and I actually forgot how to structure this. So we go refresh here. Yep, I gotta read my documentation here. So Django docs, always good to look up. So Django HTTP response. What am I missing here?
I think you have to return.
Oh, yep, good catch there. Definitely return something. So I get a quick example here. Let's do something. Just scrolling through the docs, trying to find a quick example I could look at. So where's HTTP? All right, so I can just return a text string. I don't even need to use the request object, looks like. So let's get rid of that request object and save that. All right, so my index method just returns a response. And if I refresh, all right, there we go. Got hello world. Let's make that a little bigger. All right, so hello world, cool. All right, so it looks like we hooked up one view to a URL path. All right, I think we get started with our specific challenge here. So we're, again, just to remind ourselves, we're trying to create an event calendar. In this case, we've gone through installing everything. We have a database created. If you notice in my terminal here, let me scroll up a bit. I got this kind of error message or warning message. It says I have 17 unapplied migrations. What's something I need to do here so that my database is actually up to speed with what my Django project is trying to use in terms of data? Let's see. This Zoom thing is on the wrong window.
Do you need to run the python manage.py migrate command?
Yep, that is correct. But before I run the migrate command, what's something I should be doing before that?
You have to make the mic.
Yeah, so I guess maybe I didn't quite check my project, but yeah, usually you want to make migrations before you migrate your data. But if I look in my migrations folder, again, since we created this project ahead of time, there are some migrations in here. So if I look in here, it looks like that the migration for my event already has been created, as in the migration script already exists here. I have ID, name, description, created at. The one thing that I'm looking for is, yeah, so there's a couple other fields that got added after that. So ends at and starts at. So that's the second migration script here. So I guess I'll bite my tongue there. Usually you want to run make migrations before migrate, but in this case, it looks like make migrations has already been run for us. So we don't need to do it, but it doesn't hurt to do it. So I bring up a new terminal down here, make sure I'm in the right folder. So cd event calendar. We do Python manage py. Let's do make migrations just to see if anything changes. Not in my virtual environment. So I need to do source.vnd source.vnd then activate. All right, there we go. Now I need to go into my folder. So cd events calendar and then Python manage make migrations. All right, notice Django is smart enough to know, all right, nothing's changed. So I'm not going to actually create another migration script for you. So my migrations are still the two files that were created beforehand. All right, so given that, we can run make migrations. Or sorry, we can run migrate. Apologies there. So migrate, and this should push, basically run these scripts so that any data changes will be actually committed to the database. Right now, our database is totally empty. There's nothing in there because we just created it. We didn't actually run any commands to add tables or anything like that. So we do migrate. Again, error, because I have a typo. All right, always good to have proper commands. All right, there we go. So again, Django had a bunch of migrations it wanted to push, and then also our event migrations down here. So, okay, so our database should be up to speed. That's good to know. Let's actually get into our CRUD capabilities here. So let's go to my URLs. All right, so homepage. Let's talk about how each page kind of mirrors the CRUD part. So before I get to talking about CRUD too much, let's ask, let's see, Mark, what does CRUD actually stand for? Just to remind ourselves.
I think it's create, read, update, destroy.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, there's a few variations to it. But yeah, that's just a bit. So there's C is create. R can be retrieve or read. I always go with
Retrieve,
read, but I
okay.
think yeah, either one. It doesn't really change the definition. And also, U is updating the data, and then D is destroying or deleting the data. So, yep. So when we talk about our homepage here, the way I'm envisioning this is I want my homepage just to show me all the events that exist in my database. So this is going to be the read or retrieve part of the CRUD operations. All right. So if I kind of think about that, go to my index method that I created. In this case, I don't want to just return hello world. I actually want to return a list of all the events that in my database. So to do that, I need to first make sure I have access to my model here. So I'm going to do an import to my models. Let's just import events. All right, so now I have access to the event model that we already had created. So if I return something more useful here, let's return, we need to render something. And that's an request object. It's going to be some path, and then maybe some data. All right, so data will be a dictionary. Again, remember, our render method can take in a dictionary of values. It can use those values within our template that we specify. So I'm going to need to fill this in. So let's write a comment, add in template. And our data, I'm not sure if we're going to use any data in this particular case. But yeah, we will need some data. So let me correct myself. In this case, we want to pass it all the events in our database. Sean Kern, how can I access or retrieve all the data from my events table or the events model table?
I think you want to do a event.objects, I think .all.
Yep, you got it. Good memory there. So let's just say, let's call our data events. Events will be our key, and then our values will be events dot objects dot all. Right. So this is essentially, just remind yourself, is running a select all query on that table for our events. It's going to retrieve all the objects from our database. It's going to store it inside our dictionary. We're going to pass that dictionary via the render method to our template, which we've not created yet. And it should be able to use that data and basically display all the events in our database. So let me create that template quickly. Maybe we'll ask for more help here. James White, how can I create a template? Do you remember the steps or kind of the procedures so that we can create a template file?
No, I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Fair enough. Yep, it's been a while, so let's actually kind of remember what we need to do. So again, by default, Django looks for specific folders in your application or your project here. So in my events application folder, I'm going to create a new folder and call that templates. All right, so again, by default, Django is going to look for a templates folder in each of your apps. In this case, we only have one app. So I could create a templates folder. Inside of that, I can create another folder. Let's call it events, just match our app name. Again, you could call this something else if you want to, but traditionally, you just want to call it the same as your app name. So I have templates, a nested folder in there called events. Inside of that folder, I'm going to create a HTML template file. The key distinction I want to make here is that the HTML file you create is not what your end user is going to see. It's a template HTML file that Django is going to use to render an actual HTML page. That might seem kind of, all right, saying the same thing, but there's a distinction there. All right, so I'm going to create a new file. Let's call it index.html. And here I want to create a pretty basic HTML page. So let me just use my HTML template that I always use. Let's get rid of these for now. All right, so I just want to do maybe a heading saying your event calendar. And then probably have a list, nothing too special here. Again, if you had a better UI in mind, kudos to you for kind of developing that. But in this file, I'm basically going to need to iterate over the data I pass in. So I'm going to use some Python within my HTML file So the syntax here, open curly brace, %, and then in here I could start a for loop. So I'll do for, let's call it E in events. So that's gonna be the events that we pass in, just to kind of reiterate where that's coming from. If you look at our views, this events key is the name that we're using in our template file. So if I look at this, events is coming from there. If I rename that, let's rename it something else. Let's say all events, just to make it clear what's going on. All events here. Then my template file needs all events here. Okay, so this is gonna be a for loop, but the key thing to remember for, I guess, kind of writing Python inside your HTML files, the syntax, you need to tell it where your for loop ends. So I need to do an end for here. So this is my for loop in between here. Let's create some list items. So LIL, LI, and this is going to show some data. So in this case, I want e.name. So name is a field on my model. So I look at my events model, I have name here. I can also use description and some date time fields for the display purposes. So in this case, for the summary, I just want to show the name. So if I go to my template file again, e.name is just what I want to show here. Right now, I'm not going to link to anything. I just want to make sure this works. So I'm going to save this. Now that I've created my template file, I go back to my views and tell my render method what I actually want to render. So in this case, I want to render events, which is the folder here, /index.html. So it's going to take this template HTML file, run all the Python in it, and then generate an HTML file from that. Any questions about anything we've done so far?
I got a quick
Yes.
question. When you first ran the server and you got those 2 errors for admin and events, I didn't have a chance to see what you changed to get your server to run.
Errors for, could you repeat that, Jonas?
The server was running, you just had to add events after the it was at 8,000, you had to add events after that.
Yeah, so Django is going to try to resolve the paths. If it can't, it'll show you what paths it knows about. So in this case, we had an events path, but that event path wasn't returning anything until we actually created like the view to handle it.
Okay, yeah, I got it now. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yep. Yeah, so that's where our server's running, but we have no base path. We could have a base path. So, if I go back and change my URLs, let's actually just go do that quickly. If I change this and just get rid of this, it's totally fine. Like if I just don't want a base path here, I could leave that empty. So if I save this now, by default, empty path is going to say go to events.urls. And if I look at my events.urls, I still have an empty path here. So if I want my homepage to be at my server, like my base server route, I can do that. So if I refresh this now, notice that my homepage is now just at that URL. All right. So again, it's up to you how you want to organize your paths. This is totally fine. If you want your homepage to be just like the base of the server, that makes sense in some, in some website design. So I guess I'll go about doing this. But yeah, so our homepage is now at our server location. And if you're following along, just to reiterate, we updated our URL so that, instead of having events here, we made a decision, hey, we don't want to have a base path. So that's totally fine. We just leave that blank. Okay, yep. What other questions do you guys have about what we've done so far? Okay. All right, so we have our homepage. We want to see if we actually render all of our events. Now look at our page. There's nothing here. Why is there nothing here? Aside from our title.
Sheet data yet?
Was that Rena?
Yes, sir.
All right, Rena, that is correct. So we don't have any data in our database, so we kind of wouldn't expect anything to be here. So there are a few ways we could go about this. We could offer the user a chance to create data. So that's part of our CRUD, right? Create new data. That's a little more involved. From our developer side, we have a few options for actually adding data or seeding data in our database. So that's something I want to go over, just go over all the different ways we can seed our database. So there's actually 3 different ways that I have in mind where we could seed our database. So Reno, since we're chatting, do you remember one way where we could add data to our database without writing raw SQL?
Yeah, you could just do a just make a new like a seed file, and then you could just bleh. Yeah, and then I think you just run. I don't know.
Fair enough. Yeah. So just to go over the 3 ways I have in mind, and we'll go over each example just so you guys are clear on have that practice. One way is just creating a seeds file or just a random file that you can run through Django that will basically use your Django syntax that gets converted into SQL. So that's kind of a mouthful. So let me just show an example since I didn't describe that well. I'm just going to create a file here and call it seeds.python or py. That's again just a random file that I'm going to run outside of anything else Django specific. So in this file, I think I put it on the wrong level. I'll put it inside my project folder. All right, so I put it next to my manage.py file here. So again, kind of hard to see because there's some different levels going on here. Manage.py, seeds.py is on the same level. Here I could use, I guess, Django wording or Django logic here. So if I do something like from events.models, let's import event. Now I could create some event objects. So let's say E1 is going to be a new event. The fields that we have, just to remind ourselves, since I easily forget things, we have a name and description, and then some dates we could specify. So name, description, starts at, ends at, created at. So let's create a few seeds here. So event, Reno, what's something you did over the break, if you don't mind sharing?
Pool tournaments.
Was that a pool tournament, like billiards?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, cool. I love playing pool. I'm not great at it, but I enjoy it. So let's just say pool, let's say billiards tournament. Billiards, actually billiards just mean different, right? So let's go pool tournament. Reno, do you happen to know the difference between pool and billiards? I know I read there's a slight difference. Do you know the difference?
Pool is just the common name for it, but billiards is the technical name derived from like England.
Gotcha. All right, so we have name, let's say description here. You know, we could do this a couple ways. So I could create that, and then we do e1.description. Again, you can specify in the, I guess, constructor call here, or you can specify the fields afterwards. So you can do description, let's say Reno dominated is going to dominate.
Yeah, I do.
So technically, billiards is any game with a cue and the balls. So any kind of game played on a tabletop like that.
Yeah, I know there's like one with bumpers. I forget what that's
Yeah.
called. Skewers.
Also includes the one with no pockets.
Yeah, there's like
Sudoku.
10 ball, 9 ball, 8 ball. I mean, there's so many different variants. It's just like card games.
Okay, let's create a date here. So I think the syntax, again, there's many date syntax or formats, I guess. Let's just go with this one. So let's say this is in the future, or I guess it could be the past. There's no harm in that, I don't think. So let's say that was July. Let's say it was, I don't know what date this was for Arena, but I was make up a date. Say it was on the 7th of July. So 7/7 here that we created at when we create this event. And then let's say starts at, I guess there should be a date time. So let's say this is over the weekend. What dates would that be? So today's the 12th. So let's say the 10th is when Reno had this tournament. Probably need a time here. So let's, might need to check my formatting here. So let's say that was at 1400 hours. Okay, starts at, and Reno, how long did it last? Was it all day event or something?
Yeah, it was just a 1-day thing. But yeah, it started at like 8 in the morning and finished at like 10 at night.
Okay, let's use those times. So 10 at night would be 22. Okay, so starts at, ends at. Again, I don't think any of these fields were necessarily required looking at our models. I think these are all nullable, but let's just specify all those. All right, to create an event, let's save that to our database. So we do E1 save. This is what actually adds it to our database as a record. Let's create another event, just have one more. Who else haven't I talked to this morning? Let's see. Vincent, what's something you did over break?
Had my daughter's second birthday party.
Okay, awesome. Congrats to your daughter. Do you have any like theme party or get together, or was it kind of small family event?
Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse.
Did a
okay.
lot of Mickey Mouse crafting.
All right, so let's just say second birthday party. Description, we'll say Mickey Mouse themed birthday bash. All right, sounds fun. Created at, let's make it the weekend before. So let's say it was, this event was created on the 3rd. Let's say the party was on July 4th. So I know I was kind of a slight aside. I had some, I guess, younger cousins I visited. One cousin turned 5. His birthday was in the middle of the week. But I guess one benefit of having a birthday near July 4th is their parents was like, you know, when they have fireworks shows, they could just tell their kids, yeah, like this is for you. It's you know, we did this fireworks for you. But okay, cool. So let's say, you know, that was a 3-hour birthday. So let's say that started at noon and maybe lasted until 3 p.m. So that's 1,500 hours. All right, cool. So we have another event. I need to make sure I rename my items here. So E2, save that. All right, so this is one way we create C data. So I'm gonna run this on my server. So again, the way to do that, it's not obvious. I can't just run this script file and have it kind of work. You need to run it still through your Django project. So to do that, I do Python manage.py, because that's what we always kind of use. Shell is where you can actually execute commands. So if I run shell here, now I can actually run Python commands here. But if I actually want to run what I wrote in my C's file, I need to execute that through my shell. So if I hop out of here, Control C, Control D. All right, Control D gets me out of there. Run that same command, but instead I'm going to feed in some Python scripts. So in this case, seeds.py. So it's going to run this in my shell. Again, I can type this out in my shell directly, but I prefer using the Visual Studio editor. Either way, I can run some Python commands here. So if I run this, I get an error. Date time field received a native date time. All right, so as expected, my date time formatting is not the best. Looks like a warning, so runtime warning.
Yeah, like it'll throw that if you don't include a time code, because date time field by default bakes in UTC.
Gotcha. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, so it looks like I left that time. I think it was a warning, so I'm not going to run this again. So let me check my database. Actually, better than running my database, let's actually refresh this and see if we have events listed. All right, there we go. So it looks like those were warnings. Again, thank you, Jack, for that clarification. I was creating a datetime object with a time component, so it looks like it was kind of not happy about that. But it still added my data to my database. I noticed we have 2 events. We have pool tournament and a second birthday party added to our database. All right.
Yeah, it's going to save it, but you have to include the time zone for it to stop displaying the error.
Time zone. I guess, yeah. So that's something, Musa, I'm not sure if this is what we're referring to, but if you look at your settings file inside your project folder, there's actually a spot for time zone. So right now it's using UTC. So yeah, if I'm in my, the central time zone, you might want to change this to be your Chicago local time zone. In this case, it's going to be UTC, so that's, just standard time. But you can adjust that if it makes sense for your project.
Quick question for running through the shell. Because you created the database by hand, so I would assume you could feed in the data like you would a normal database. Why is it that you specifically have to use the shell? Or would you need, would you be able to feed it into the database outside of the shell and then make another migration, or no?
If I understand the question correctly, and apologies if I don't, I wrote this, and this is Python code.
Yep.
If I wrote raw SQL, then I could just run, my.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, this needs to be converted to SQL somehow, and that's what Django takes care of.
Got it.
I think what you're suggesting is if this were SQL, then yeah, I could just run a pSQL, my database name, and feed it this way, like we did, in the past couple weeks. Database name, and then.
Got it. Thank you. That explained it.
Yep. So similar concept, but it's just, again, if we don't want to write raw SQL ourselves, Django will do that for us. Again, it's easier, in my head, it's easier to kind of work with objects than writing SQL and running all the syntax for that. Were there any other questions about C data in this manner?
Yeah, say you had to come back and add some
some seed data, would it duplicate those first two entries, or do you have to do like a delete all kind of thing?
Yes. So it's gonna, if I run this again, it's gonna create a new pool tournament. It's not gonna update this one. So I'm gonna see a duplicate if I run this again. So yeah, one way I could delete everything in my database. So to do that, I could do something like events.objects.delete. I think that should take care of it. I might need a .all delete. I always forget. But this will delete all the objects and kind of just let us create the new C data without duplication. The downside of this is actually the IDs here. So this is probably ID 0. This is probably ID 1. Sorry, this is ID 1, ID 2, because SQL or database start at 1. If I deleted objects and inserted new ones, this will now have ID 2 and this will have ID 3. So it doesn't reset your ID counter if you do it in this manner. So that's one downside of kind of writing a seeds file yourself. So if we kind of transition to the next approach, it's using fixtures. And this is like the Django appropriate way to create seed data. So to do that, I'm going to go to my events folder and my app folder, create a specific folder called fixtures. Again, just to make it clear again, it has to be named fixtures. If you name it something else, then you need to customize some other paths in your settings. So you do have the ability to customize where Django looks for, seed data or template files. In this case, I'm just going to use the default, which is called fixtures. All right, so I create that folder. Inside of here, you can create different format types. There's YAML, there's JSON, XML. So you have a few options. I'm going to go with JSON just because that doesn't require anything additional for me to install. So if I create a new file, let's call it seeds.json. Is there a question there? So I've created a file called seeds.json, and here I'm just going to write some JSON that is going to represent my data. And I never remember the format here, but I think it's model. I want to tell it the model. So in this case, it's events.event is my model name. And then I think I'm going to need to look this up. So again, don't need to memorize everything, just need to know how to understand how to do everything. So if I search for Django fixtures, that should give me the page I want. Yep, providing initial data for models. All right, so this is the syntax I want. So it's going to be a list, not a dictionary here. So let me just copy what they have and work off that. All right, so you need to specify a model. So in this case, my app name is events, and my model name is events. Primary key will be 1. Fields. All right, so we need to specify the fields we want to add. So let's do name, description. Create a few more fields. I don't know if I need to provide them all. Let's just do one of the fields. Let's do created at, and I think I can leave the rest of them blank. Let me talk to some other students here. Don Kelly, can you tell me something you did over break?
I caught up on all the things that I didn't do the last 7 weeks, like going to the doctor and the dentist and straightening up the mess around my home.
Gotcha. Let's go with dentist appointment. If I can spell dentist appointments. All right, description, time to get your teeth checked. Created at, let's just say that's gonna be a future event. So I know Don said he did this over break. Let's just say that's gonna be done in August. Let's say August 1st. I need the year 1st, 2021. Okay, and let's just say that's a afternoon appointment at 1300 hours. All right, so I'm not going to provide everything else. Description, I do need to spell correctly though. All right, description. All right, and that's going to be primary key 1, but that's going to collide with my data that I have already. So in this case, I could do item 3. I believe if you leave it off, I'm going to need to check this. If you leave off the primary key, it should automatically generate for you. So let's actually try that. I've done this before. I forget exactly what needs to be done. I'm going to leave off the primary key. Should use the next available primary key available. So I have events. Let's just create the one event here. All right, I'm going to save this. And now to run these fixtures, I'm going to go back to my console, do Python manage.py, load data is the command I'm running here. And then I'm going to specify what seeds file I want to run. So in this case, seeds.json is my file here. So I'm going to specify the name of it, seeds.json. All right, if I run this, it should, if my syntax is correct, I'm not even sure if it's correct. It should run this and create insert a new item called dentist appointment. So let's run that. Okay, so I got a warning. Specify the time here. Maybe it's because of, let's see.
Do you need milliseconds or anything like that?
No, it looks like I need like a time zone maybe. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to research this error or this warning. So it's a warning, not the end of the world, but I definitely want to clean that up at some point. But it should have inserted this data. So if I refresh here, notice I got dentist appointment added back here. All right, so now the question is, what if I run this again? So let's run that same command. So we can do python manage.py load data seeds. Let's actually specify a primary key here. So primary key, let's do 3. So now what's gonna happen here? I already have 3 items and dentist appointment should have primary key value 3. If I wanna verify that quickly, I should be able to. So I do psql, what's my database name? Django event calendar, I think. All right, there we go. Let's do a select star from, again, you gotta remember the Django formatting of table names. So it should be your app name, which is events, and then your model name, I think events. All right, there we go. So notice we have 3 items in here, kind of jumbled up, but dentist appointment does have ID 3. So my main question was gonna be, if I try to insert a new record with the same primary key, is it gonna complain, hey, you already have a record with primary key 3, or is it gonna just update that record? So let's change dentist appointment to doctor's appointment. Doctor's appointment.
If you're doing this with the fixture, it's just going to rewrite it with the new.
Yep. Yeah. So it's not actually going to collide. So with fixtures, you can run it again, and it's going to replace your existing data instead of kind of trying to add a new record. If the primary key matches. So if I go back to, what was it? Yep. If I run python manage.py load data seeds.json, apologies for the word wrapping there. There we go. Let's run that again. All right, so we got 1 fixture, 1 object. Let's actually refresh our page. Oh, it was actually appended it. I'm surprised by that. All right, that's not what I expected.
Wasn't it prior? Does it start with primary key 0 or does it start with primary key 1?
It starts with 1, so I'm actually kind of surprised. Let's see what the database did here. What did we get in our database? All right, it looks like it just ignored my primary key request, which is kind of rude. I didn't expect that. Yeah, let me try running that one more time. I did not expect that, so I'm a little confused.
Try a primary key like 10 and see if it actually uses what you say.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Don?
Try a primary key like 10.
10.
Be a duplicate and see if it actually uses what you say.
Okay, sure. So let's try 10.
Are you supposed to have a colon in your primary key in the quotes?
Oh,
Maybe throwing it off.
That is great. Good eyes. I think that was the issue. So that is my apology. My bad. Thank you, Alex. I would not have caught that for a long time. Yep. Looks like my field should be named PK, not PK colon. So that is something I did wrong. All right, let's try running this again. So again, let's change that to 4. Let's just say doctor's appointment updated.
And you do already have a 4.
Yep. So in this case, I want to try to overwrite this doctor's appointment instead of adding a new item. So assuming that I have my primary key syntax corrected here, I updated that doctor's appointment with updated. So let's run that again. If I go back to my Python, there we go. There we are. Let's run that command again. All right, one more time. Ran that. Okay, let's actually refresh the page. There we go, updated. So yeah, sorry, that's what I was trying to do before. Thank you, Alex, for catching that. If you specify a primary key that already exists, it's going to update that record. It's not going to complain like, hey, that record exists. It's going to say, all right, your fixtures wants to kind of update that. So In contrast to what we were doing before with our seeds file, if you remember, running that file again would create duplicates. If I ran this again, it'll create multiple pool tournaments and second birthday parties, but fixtures kind of will automatically wipe and update your records. So that's a benefit of using fixtures, again, the Django approved way. And just to complete our discussion here, I don't want to sidetrack too much. The third way to add data is via the admin panel. And that's usually the easiest way, just because the panel really has a nice UI. So does anyone remember how I can actually get access to the admin panel here?
Is that from localhost /admin or am I wrong?
Yep, you're right. So we have that admin path set, but we need a login. Does anyone remember how to create a login?
It's like manage PY, create super user, all one word.
Yep, Jack has it correct. So if I do Python nh.py, so this create super user command just creates like an admin level user in your system, in your Django project system, so that you can have access to the admin panel. So I do create super user, all one word, as Jack said, run that. It's going to ask you to fill out a form. You can leave it blank and it'll use the defaults. In this case, I want to create a user called admin, email address, don't care about, password, super secret password of admin, and verify that. Again, Django is kind of protects you and saying, hey, you have a kind of a stupid password, be better about it. But in this case, I don't care too much about security. So I'll go with yes. And all right, super user created successfully. So if I go here, admin and my super secret password, there we go. Notice we have events here. So these are our event objects, but they don't have any descriptive names. Does anyone remember how we could actually kind of see something more user-friendly here? Let me call on someone. Who I chatted with this morning. Definitely missed chatting with you guys over break. Let's see. Heard from all you guys. I feel like I've talked to a lot of people today. Sarah, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Hey, Sarah, how can I actually change like the display of this so that instead of seeing event object 4, I see something that's actually more, I guess, human readable here?
I'm not sure, but wouldn't that be in the code?
Yep, somewhere in the code. Do you remember what in the code we need to change?
No, I don't remember.
Fair enough. All right, so the thing we need to add is we need to update our model. We're not actually going to change the structure of our model. We're just going to add some method to it. So if I do def dunder method string, or the string dunder method, either way.
That makes sense.
Yep. So we specify some string method. That's what Django will use for the front end. So if I do, I need self here, and let's return simple string here. Just return the name, self.name. So I do that, save this. Again, I do not need to update a database because my structure has not changed. So my model has not changed here. So if I save this and refresh my admin page, notice I actually see the title of my events. All right, so a simple dunder method. Usually you want to create any models you create, just always kind of remember to create a string dunder method because you'll probably need that at some point anyway. So now I actually see these items, right? I could update these if I want to, but this lets me create new data. So this is another way to seed your database. It's a little more manual in terms of, if you want to create like 100 items, it's going to get kind of tedious, but it gives you more control, I think. So if I want to add event, just go to add event. Let's say, Kyle Gunter, can you tell me something you did over your break?
Yeah, I can. I had a barbecue with the kiddos.
All right, let's go with BBQ. Fun time with family. And right, so again, the fields kind of just easier to work with. I don't know how to remember formatting. I always kind of blank on my date time formatting. So let's say this is a future event. Let's say it's going to be on the 17th. We can specify the time. We now, which doesn't make sense. Let's say it's noon. Again, just more UI friendly stuff here. So let's say it ends on the 17th also. Ends at, let's say it's a 6-hour barbecue. It sounds like a fun time. Created at, so by default, this should be now. That's something that's specified in our model. Remember, maybe I didn't point this out, but the default value for each of these fields is now, as in this current time. So created at is going to, by default, be right now, which makes sense because that's why I'm creating the item. So I'm not going to modify my created at date. Hit save. All right, get a nice response here. If I go back to my homepage, notice I got that barbecue added. Okay, so I just want to go over adding seed data. You have many options. You use Fixtures. In Django, you could write your own seeds file and just run the Python code yourself, or you could use an admin panel, kind of whatever you think is best for whatever you're trying to accomplish. But you have many options there. The fourth way, I guess, is not the developer side, is having your user create data from your application. That's, again, getting back to CRUD functionality. So that's something we're going to do with our event calendar here. But before we do that, I think we should definitely take a break. We've been going at it for a while now. Let's take a 9-minute break and be back at 10:50, and we'll kind of continue on from here.
Hey, Uncle, quick question. So when you ran the shell, I know this is probably about a good 15 minutes ago or so, but what was the command where you were able to run the shell from the terminal? I kind of got lost there.
Sure. So python.manage.py.shell will actually let you type code here. So if I want to write any Python code, like print hello world, you can just execute Python from the shell, right? So that's the output. But if you want to just write your own file, which is kind of the way I like doing it, just because I like using the editor instead of using the shell for typing Python, you just write all your Python specific code here. And to execute that in your shell, let me drop out of this, so Control D. You want to run that shell command, but feed it to this arrow command, and then the file name. So in this case, my file is seeds.python.
Got it.
So now it's going to take all the contents of this and run it line by line, as if I were typing it into a shell myself.
Okay, so what that command does, you said, is basically you're just like feeding the Python commands directly into the shell or the terminal or whatever else. That way.
Yep. Yeah. So the two options are I could type each line line by line into my shell when I'm in that shell console, or I could just write that in my file, and then it'll kind of essentially execute line by line here.
If we're creating test data, using one of these first two methods works a lot better than the other, because you'd have to retype everything.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay. Yeah, let's take a 7-minute break, and then we'll be back at it at 10:50. All right. Before we progress with our CRUD capabilities, were there any questions about what we've done up until this point? All right, I'll take that as
Here's
a
one thing. When you were setting up these variables E1 and E2, if you hadn't changed it to E2, wouldn't it have worked? Because the variable is only used until you get to the save command.
100% correct. Yes, Don is correct. I actually did not need to rename these. That is correct. I could use the same variable. That's not going to be an issue because I'm creating a new object on line 13. So good observation there. I think by default, just wanted to create a new variable just because it's a different object, but you're right. I could have reused the same name there. Yep. Yeah, good catch there. But otherwise, so hopefully you guys are kind of familiar with different ways to see data from the developer side. We want to actually get to offering the user of our application to add new data. So for that, we're going to actually need to add some more logic. So let's kind of quickly go through our motions here. So one thing, I have my home page. I want to add a detail page. So if I want to actually look at each event, I should be able to do that. So let's say that's going to be events integer value event ID. So I'm actually going to capture some value from the path they're navigating to, so I can use it in my, I guess, view logic. So if I do, let's call it event detail, and same name, event detail. Let's keep it with underscores. All right, so we're going to create a new path that's going to take in an ID. Okay, I think that's good. So I need a method called event detail. So go back to my views. Let's create that quickly. Go here. And now, so I got to change some data here. And instead of showing all events, I want to show one particular event. So let's say my event. Let's have a unique name. I want to get a particular event. So in this case, our method here is going to be called event detail. Again, this name has to match what you're specifying in your URL. So I called it event detail. In my views, that's event detail. However, this method, unlike my index method, is actually going to take in another parameter. So that parameter is going to be called event ID. Thomas Brinson can you tell me where the name of this comes from?
You can hear me, right?
Yep.
You're asking where event ID comes from?
Yeah, the name of that. So what if I name this, let's say I want to use the name of donut.id, hypothetically. Again, not a good name, but for this example, let's say I want to use donut ID. What else do I need to change if I want to use donut ID here?
My apologies. I'm not sure.
No need to apologize. Absolutely. But yeah, so that's coming from this line here. So if I want to use donut.id in my views, I need to change this to donut underscore ID. So whatever
Got it.
name you specify here is what's going to be actually passed as an object here. All right. So in this case, donut ID is not really representative of what we want to do. So I'm going to change it back to event ID. Again, you can name it. You have the liberty to name that variable whatever you want to. In this case, event ID is what makes sense to me. So I'm going to call it event ID here. All right, so based on the path that the user goes to, as in they're going to make a request, HTTP request to a specific path, we're going to get an event ID from that path, and that's what we're going to use to extract a particular event ID. All right, so in this case, we're going to get an event. We could do some error checking here. So if I grab an event from the database, let's say this primary key doesn't exist, we should probably check that and say, hey, if not event, maybe show some error, HTTP response, hey, that event doesn't exist, or some message so the user gets the message that we're trying to convey. So in this case, my event will be the event from my database, assuming that we get a valid one. We're going to pass that within our data, so it's good. We need to render something else here. So instead of rendering my home page, I'm going to copy that and let's create a detail page. So I'm going to rename this. Let's call it detail.html. All right, it's going to look pretty similar. So instead of event calendar here, let's make that the name of our event. So in this case, it would be event.name as our header. And then we don't need a for loop anymore. We're just going to show some data. So I'm just going to create a few paragraph fields quickly here. Again, if I'm going too quickly, if you guys have any questions, please stop me. I'm just going to show some event details here so that we get the idea of the events. So the event.description. That's a field on our event model. We also have, let's create H3. This will be events.start. And hopefully I have these field names correct. Always good to double check it. So I think it ends at, and there's also create at, but let's say I'm not interested in I'll add that, just whatever. All right, and created at. All right, let's double check those. So starts at, ends at, created at. All right, that looks good. Go back to my template, detail.html. So I'm just going to show this again. It's not going to look too pretty, but we can also obviously style it up some more if we had more time. But I'm going to save that. All right, so we have our detail.html. I'm going to go back to my views and specify that that's the template I want to render for my detail view. So detail.html. We pass an event. Again, that event is used. Oh, can anyone spot an error? I just cut my error. Does anyone happen to know what error I introduced?
It want to be the data portion.
It is related to my data. That is where my error is. So I guess it's kind of vague, but I named my event. That's the key for the data I'm passing. So in my template here, I can't just use events. I gotta match that name of that value I pass it. So in this case, all of these need to be my event because that's the name I specified. Does that make sense to everyone? So we're gonna pass that data dictionary to our template here. This template is gonna look for something called my event in this case. If it tried to look for something called event, it wouldn't find it, and we get some errors here. All right, so my event is the name of my variable because that's what I pass it as the key in my data. Is that clear for everybody?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. All right, so now that that's hooked up, I think I got all the pieces. So my template set up, my views, my view method set up in that detail, takes in the event ID. We fetch that particular event from our database. So objects.get using that primary key. assuming that event exists, we render a detail template. So now I actually want to be able to link to that. So I need to update my homepage. So right now our homepage is listing the event name, but we want to actually link to it. So to do that, I'm going to add an anchor tag and surround the name. Now this needs to link to the particular page I want to go to. So this might be a tougher question, but I want to see if anyone's can help me out here. How can I actually create that link? What do I need to pass for my href here? Anyone know?
Just the file path.
The file path. Could you clarify that? Like, let's say, you know, we have our first event, which was pool tournament. What do I pass in here so I can actually link to that detail page?
That is a good question.
All right, yep, good question. Let's get a good answer to it. So if I go back to my URLs, notice that my path right now is events. It's just an event ID. So if I want to link to this path, I would need to go to my index and just specify the ID. So here, the ID should be e.id. So that's the ID for the event, right? That's the primary key. This might be a little confusing. So if I wanted to clean it up a little bit or make it a little more obvious what's going on here, if I made this like events slash, you know, if that's my path, then my URL should be events slash and then ID. So whatever path I need to navigate to, that's what I'm specifying here. In this case, I just want the event ID as my identifier. All right, so assuming my syntax correct here, I was kind of nervous with, you know, curly braces syntax here, but if that's set up correctly, we should create an anchor, or basically a link that will be navigating to this path. That path should be handled by our new URL routing that we have here, event slash event ID. And that should call our event detail method. We look at our event detail method. Again, that accepts an event ID, and that should render our detail template. All right, so a lot of gears going here, but hopefully they all connect. Let's see if we actually hook this up correctly. So if I save that, refresh my page. All right, we got some links, so that looks good. But do they actually go to where we want to go to? So if I click on pool tournament, all right, this looks correct. I don't remember the particular details, but Reno is going to dominate this tournament. So that looks like a correct detail. Again, not stylized the best. We're just trying to render content at this point, but probably should clean this up if we're gonna create an actual application. Any questions about the detail page here and how we link to it? All right, you guys good then? All right, so we did the easier part, which is the read or retrieve, where we could retrieve, you know, details about each model. But let's actually get to the harder portion, which is creating new data and updating data. So to do that, we need to create a form. So I'm going to go to I'm going to create my template first in this case. Go to my template folder, let's call create.html. Probably should name these a little more descriptively, but create.html, and this is going to be a form. So I'm just going to copy what I had before and convert that to a form. So in this case, we don't have any of this stuff. Let's just say create h1 create new events. All right, and this is going to be a form. So this form lets us capture data or input from the user. So form here, excuse me, we want a particular action here. So the action will be to, let's see, go to a URL and events. What am I doing here? Percent. Something seems off here. Oh, need strings here. Now I do my app name, which is events, and then I want to do create events. And in this case, all right. So what I'm doing here, I'm calling this form is going to be processed by this method. So I'm using our syntax from before. In this case, this is a relative path, so I could change the actual path here, but the name should remain the same. So what I mean by that, if I go to my URLs, here I'm going to create a new path. Let's say that path is going to be, let's call it creates events, and then, or let's call it new, keep it simple, new, and then views that create events. The name, the name here is what matters. So if I call it events, create event here, let's actually call it event create. If I call this event create here in my template file, I need to call this event create. It needs to match that name. All right, why do we do things this way? The main thing is, if I go back to my URLs, let's say I want to change this, like instead of calling it new, I want to call it create or whatever I want to change it to. The important thing is, based on the name, my template does not need to change. This is going to remain constant, even though my actual path here is changing. So that's why you usually want to use relative URL paths instead of hard coding it. So if I call this new, which I have before, create events, event create.
I believe you're missing an S in views.
Yep. Also, one thing I need to do here is define my app name. So app underscore name, and that's going to be events. So that's what my template's going to look for. Events is the app name, and then event create is what I've decided to call my route. Let's actually make that more consistent. Event create. All right, so let's actually go about doing this quickly. So event create is what I need to create in my views. We go to my views, define event create, takes in a request object, and that's going to return some render of the template we just created. So request events, and what did I call it? Create.html. And then we're gonna, I don't know if we need data passed to it, but I'll just stuff that in there in case we do. All right, so that's gonna render our create. So if I save this right now, and I navigate to /new, which is over here. All right, so nothing going on here right now, but we want to add in some form fields so the user can actually enter data. So if I go back to my template, let's add some form fields here. So let's do a label, and that label is going to be where our fields. We had name, and then we need an input field. So input. You need to specify a name attribute here. If you remember from Friday, I actually used ID instead of name. It does matter. So in this case, I'll do both. I'll do ID equals, let's call it name, and name equals name. Any questions about name versus ID?
What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so ID is used for pretty much every element in your HTML document. You want to give, you don't have to, but usually you want to give an ID so you could, grab this element from your JavaScript, for example, by ID. The name field is used specifically for forms so that when you're processing a form, it'll look for this field in your form data and be able to extract it based on the name attribute that you've given it. So again, these don't need to match. Like I call this name field, for example. Let's go with that. Hopefully I remember when we actually process this form. But the name is used by the form, I guess, processor versus the ID is used by like JavaScript or something else. All right, so we'll see this in play, but just keep in mind that we called it name field, name underscore field. All right, so we have an input and then inputs. Let's do one more field. I don't know if I want to put all of these up. Let's do name and description, label or description. Description, type correctly. All right, so make sure we give it the right name. So description is their ID. Let's say description field. All right, so events description will be the placeholder. Okay, so we have two fields here. We need a button so that we can actually allow the user to submit this form. So button, a lot of buttons here. Button, we'll call it, let's say create events, and type will be submit. All right, one other thing I want to specify for my form here is the method. So the method is going to be a post. All right, so basically when the user hits the submit button, it's going to submit a post request to this URL that I'm specifying. All right, so we talk about get versus post. Usually get is when you navigate to a page and just reading data. That's a get request. Post is the typical method for when the user is actually submitting data to the server for it to process. All right, so given that, I'm going to save my template here, go back to my browser and refresh. All right, there we go. Not the best layout here, but we do have fields where we enter. So let me clean up that layout partially, just for my sanity here. Add a break line there and a break line here. So these are just new lines for HTML documents. So look at that. All right, there we go. Again, alignment, not the best, but I'm going to live with that for now. All right, so now we can create an event name. So let's say, I don't know, Jung Park. What's something going on for you in July or August? Any events that you're looking forward to? All right, I'm not sure if Jung's muted. Let's go with Jeremiah. Any events coming up that you're looking forward to in July or August or later on in the summer?
My birthday, July 31st.
All right, Jeremiah's birthday. Anything you're gonna do for it? Do you have any plans for it?
It's gonna be the Agile weekend.
All right. So Agile development or Agile seminar, whatever we call it. So that's one way to party there. All right. So that's gonna be a description. So if I create new event right now, if I look at my logic for create event, we're doing nothing here. So we're just gonna submit this data and we're just gonna throw away the data because we're not processing it. So if we do that, take my word for it, nothing special is gonna happen when I click create event, but we want to actually do something special. So in this case, we want to check if the method is a post. So to do that, we do if request.method and check if that's equal to post. So now this function is going to handle two items. If it's a get request, it's going to simply return the form, display it to the user. If it's a post, we're going to take that data and actually do something with it. So if request.method equals post, we want to create an event, let's say. So let's call it event, new event. We're going to create an event object. And here we're going to populate all the fields on it. So new.event.name is going to be coming from the post data. So we do, I think it's request.post. This is going to be a dictionary. Now the name, what name goes here? Does anyone kind of have an inkling of what might go here? All right, so the answer to that is the name of the field we gave. So that's where we line up this name attribute that we gave for the input. That value, in this case, I call it name field or description field, is what we use to extract value out of the dictionary of data that's passed back to us. So when the user hits the submit button or the create event button, our dictionary here, request.post, again, that's just a dictionary of data, is going to have an item for name field and also description field. So that's how we transfer data from the HTML form that we created. The user enters in data, hits submit. That data is kind of bundled up and transferred via dictionary to our Python code. So description here. Okay, so I'm just going to do those two fields. The other three fields are auto set to like the now value, so I don't need to really specify that. New event. I probably want to do some validation, so let's do new event dot full clean. And we want to save new event. Again, I don't have any validation going on myself, but always good practice to make sure you validate your data before you save it to your database. So in this case, assuming I have valid data, we should save it to a database, and then at this point, we just want to return. As in, we don't want to render the page again. So maybe let's show something to our users. Let's do return HTTP response. Let's just say new events. All right, so the user gets some feedback. Otherwise, I think another thing we want to do here is do a try except. So always good to have saved code. So let's say, something might throw an exception here, whether it be the save or the full clean. If there's any error, I'm just going to say return HTTP response, error, creating a new event. I don't know, you can be more descriptive, probably catch the error and try to display it to your user, but I'm not gonna get too fancy here. So right now I don't need this data object, so I'll get rid of it. What questions you guys have about what we've set up here? In terms of our template, we have a form, pretty basic form, not the best looking, but allows us to have our user enter data. They hit submit. We specify the method of that submit is going to be a post request. That's going to be processed by this path. Again, event create is specified in our URLs here. So that path is actually, the new, but we can change that. So to highlight that, notice right now I'm at localhost 8000/new. Let's say I want to change my path, like whatever our client, let's say we're working with a client, like, hey, we actually want our path to be create instead of new. Well, given that, I don't need to change my template because I've made that a relative path. So the name of this has stayed the same. Again, I did not change the name here. All I changed is the path. So now if I go to create, that should still get me to the same point. So go create, yep, still at my form here. All right, so let's actually add that event. I probably should add it before for Jeremiah's birthday. Agile certification. I have a lot of typos. All right, agile certification of create. I got forbidden. What did I forget here?
Your token at the top.
Yeah. Easy to forget. It's just that it's this, again, it's nothing that you can kind of deduce. It's just something that needs to be there for security purposes. So here, Django's kind of, telling me straight up, hey, CSRF validation failed or verification failed, missing your token. So again, this is something to remember. Easy to forget. I forget, again, pretty much half the time, if not more. Here, we need to add the token. So CSRF _ token. And there's just magic there going on. You guys can read about it if you're curious, what that's accomplishing. If I save that, spell it correctly, of course, token. Let's go back here. Let's try refreshing this. Jeremiah's B-Day. Agile. I'm going to get lazy with writing, so I'm just going to write agile. Create event. Okay, so we got something happened, but we didn't actually get the message I was hoping for. So we didn't get this response, so that's not a good sign. So I'm guessing my full clean failed. Let's actually see if that's true. So return the response. Something went wrong in validation. Okay, let's try that again. We're going to enter garbage because I'm being lazy of typing. Create event. Yep, so it looks like our validation is going incorrect. I assume it's that warning we we're getting before about the time zone stuff. I'm not actually sure, but let's see. Full clean. Django get errors. Right, field validation. How do we do this? So we're doing full clean. There are other things that we try. All right, so I'm going to try to quickly figure out how I could catch the error. Let's see, does this page have what I'm looking for? Doesn't look like it does. Does anyone happen to know how I can capture the error that's coming back instead of this generic thing? Does full clean actually return anything?
Can you capture instead of if, the full clean, put that in a try except block and catch the exception?
Yeah, but so if this were throwing an exception, it should be caught here because this block is in a try except. So it's not throwing an exception, I don't think. How can I actually get that error message? I might kind of circumvent this. Again, good practice is always make sure your data is valid. I'm not sure what's wrong here. Let's actually print out values, make sure, let's print out our dictionary here. So let's go press that post, make sure we're getting the same correct values out. And let's run this. So, okay, go back. Let's run that again. All right, Python. All right, so this is our dictionary. apologies, kind of hard to see here. Our name field has the correct value, description field has correct value, so that looks okay. And our models should be auto set to now. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going wrong here. Apologies, I don't want to spend too much time on this. So I'm actually just not going to validate my data and assume it's good enough. So bad practice, just warning, warning, don't do this. Always full clean before entering your value. But right now, I'm gonna assume it's just that time zone issue that I was dealing with before. Let's try this. So if I do this and go back, let's say Jeremiah's day, agile, cert. Let's try that. Okay, new event got created, but did it actually get created, right? So let's actually go to our homepage. All right, we have Jeremiah's birthday, and there we go, agile certification. This is, again, this is UTC time, so it is not 4:18 p.m. where I am at, but this is where I think Greenwich, England, so it's 4:18 at in wherever the time zone is specified from. All right, so that's our create. Again, we're doing it manually by grabbing the data and adding it to our model and then saving our model. All right, so that's our create. Our update is very similar. Let's actually do our update quickly. I'm going to copy all the code I have here and go to update. So updates can be very, very similar to the point where I probably don't want to duplicate my code. I think on Friday I duplicated my code. So today I'm going to try to condense my code. So instead of using create, I'm going to copy that so I don't lose what I had before. I'm going to create a template called form.html. So this form is going to be used both by my create logic and my update logic. But to do that, I need to make a few changes. So in this case, form will be, let's say, how do I do this? Let's see, Jinja, yes, no. All right, so looking at some syntax here, this person wants to do like a if-else block. How do you do that in Jinja? It looks like you do ternary like that. So I'm going to do something similar here. I do create. Hope this works. Create if create or update, else update. All right, so I have a ternary here. Hopefully that works as I expected. Have my form here. This should be processed by, let's see. That's gonna be a ternary also, but like it's a little messy. So how do I do this effectively? All right, so basically this form should call events that create in one case, else should correct like event.update. I'm gonna need to figure out how to do this. Let's see. I think I have a solution that I've figured up. Here, let me reference that quickly. Button, post. Okay, so looking at this action, if I leave this off, I think it's going to use the current pages on. So let me actually take this off. So if I don't specify an action, it should use the current pages on. So if I just post back to the current URL, I shouldn't have to specify where I want that processed. And that's what I want to go with. Here, I need a value of, let's see. Let's say if, what's the value going to be? It's going to be update event if update events. All right, I'm going to try this out. I think it should work, but we'll talk about it. So let me just code this up and we'll talk about it if you guys are confused about what I'm adding. So update event dot name and description. And that should be Okay, so basically I'm trying to create a form that could be handled by the create and update logic. So I had some like a ternary here that will show the appropriate title. I'm going to show a value if I pass in an update event object. So let's actually try this out. So I'm gonna go back to my views. So event create that calls that template. So this is form, and then this is form also. All right, so for my update here, I need an ID that I get passed. So let's say events ID is what I'm going to pass here. I need to get that event up here. You guys following along, or did I lose you guys somewhere? Questions? Please ask. Please ask.
I'm here, Unker. I'm just watching.
All right, so event ID. So they're going to go update a particular event. They're going to pass that ID. We're going to grab that event from our database, and that should be what we update here. So instead of creating a new event, we want to update event here. All right, don't want to print this dictionary anymore. Get that out of the way. Okay, so update events. We don't create a new event. We still update it here. The key thing here is we need to pass some data. So I'm going to do a data dictionary. And the value I'm going to pass is if I go back to my form, I have something called update event that I want to pass for the update case. So that's going to be the name of my key. So go to views, call that update events. And that's going to be, I guess, same name variable, update event. So now for my form, if I pass it an update event, it should use the values from that event. So I'm going to save this right now. I can still condense some of this code because, again, it's very similar. But let me just do this incrementally. So let's see if I go back to create. Right. I did not like that turn there. It says it's possible. What did I do wrong here? So form, single. Yeah, I don't think the syntax is working as I would expect. Single quotes. Nope. All right, let's see, put some more Google in here. So Jinja, conditional, Django. All right, so I guess I could just do it this way. There's no thing I can do it in one line, but it looks like I cannot. So if create or update equals true, then I want my heading to be, say, sorry. Let me try one more thing. I don't think I need string thing. All right, sorry for a slight detour. I want to get this working. Probably don't need to worry about the title too much, but let's just say update or else block or else branch will be update, should be create. All right, let's see if this actually works. So basically I have an if statement. I want to specify based on this value that I should be passing. So I go back to my views. My data should have that in there. So a new data value of create or update. In this case, it's going to be false for the update case, but my create case needs to specify that value. So I go back here. I need to specify that this is a update case. So in this case, I need all right, so for the create case, we don't have any update event we pass in. We want to specify this is a create case as a Boolean, true or false. In the update case, we do have an update event, and that's false for that value. Let's see if that makes a difference. All right, something's wrong there. Looks like ternaries do not work as I would want them to. Seems like it is possible, ternary. Yes, that's one way. There's a yes, no. I think that's what I want. So field name, yes, no. All right, let's try that. So form and there's the syntax here. So field name, yes, no. Okay. Let's give that a try. Yes, no. What else do we do? Colon. And then 2 values. So one value is going to be event name. The other is going to be empty string. Hope this works. Comma, empty string. All right. Hopefully that works. I don't think it will. Yes, no. Else, don't mean else. All right. Event, yes, no. All right, so value, yes, no, and then yes, no, maybe in strings. All right, so let's try that. Yes, no, if there. That work? Maybe. All right, this is not going to work as I want it to. So how do we get around this? One way around it is I could have if statements here. So if I do a giant if create or update, and then have that as a block. And this would be else. Again, this is it actually isn't really condensing much code as I wanted it to, but do you want to use the same HTML template so this can go away? All right, so for the create case, we had what we had before in the update case. Let's see, for I feel like I'm typing without talking much. What questions do you guys have as I try to clean up my code so that it works as I want it to? Basically, I'm trying to conditionally show HTML elements based on some variable I pass in. Ternaries should be possible, but it seems like I do not know how to do that offhand. Definitely have done it before, so it is possible. I can say that much for sure. In this case, one of values. Value equals update event.name. And value here would be update event. Okay, this will be description. All right, so what I did here is just create a giant if else block that shows each field, depending on which case I'm trying to handle. So end if here, make sure you close your if blocks and for blocks. So again, not the cleanest code. Tab that to maybe make it a little easier to read. All right, so one case is our create case. Let's see if that works now. All right, so we got our form back. These are not working correctly. Do I need to specify for name, field, That work? Nope. All right, I'm gonna add those labels back in the right spot so my form looks somewhat decent. But it is a lot of duplicate code, so I'm not happy with it currently. Name. Okay. So make sure our create works the same. So if I go back here, this says update. That's what I want. I just say updates. If create or update equal true. All right, that didn't work. If create or update equals true, right, create. Else that. Yeah, this is not working as I had planned. So I'm passing in true here for creator update. So creator update should be true here, but that does not appear to be the case. All right, do something. Let's create a new event. Let's just say nap, get some sleep, submit, event created. Is that true? All right, we got a nap there. Let's see if update works. So I need to be able to update this. So let's create that link. So we go to the detail page. Let's create a button. The button will be here. Let's just say update events. That's going to be a link. Oh my gosh. All right, so we create a button where they hit update event. Let's maybe separate that out. So let's add an HR. Now they're gonna hit update event. We wanna actually go somewhere. So it can be href. The path will be where the update happens. So if I go to my URLs, I need to add that here. So I'm gonna add a new path underneath my detail. So to update it, let's say they go to /update on the event. So this should navigate to update, and the name should be update also. All right, so the new URL should be event / the event ID /update. So I go back to my detail page. That link here should be event / what is it? My event ID and then /update. All right, so when they click on that button, it should take them to this, which should take us to the proper form that we want to get to. So actually test this out. Definitely a lot of moving pieces here. So refresh here. All right, so we have a button. Let's see what happens when we click on that button. We get page not found. So trying to go to events. Okay, so it looks like I don't need, where are we? Detail. So should be right. So trying to go to events. So I have two events here. I only want one event. Why would that be the case? Slash there. So events. I'll leave this off. I'm not sure why I need to leave that off though. I'm still trying to go to events. What's the deal here?
Could it possibly be your naming and your URL under your app?
What was that, Alex?
I was saying, is it possibly like the naming convention under your apps is why you're getting two events?
Under my apps, could you specify what you mean by that?
Well, you were saying because under URLs you're getting event / events, and I figured it might be your naming convention or something you might have accidentally added events twice.
Yeah, let's actually try a different approach. So if I go to my detail page, instead of doing this, I should probably use relative path. So that might clean this up for me. So URL and the path would be app name. So that's events. And then the route is going to be what I call it, event update. And in this case, we need to pass an ID. So the ID is my event.id. So now event update should process that, which is this URL, hopefully. So if I save that, let's try that one more time. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here. So it's prepending an extra event here. If we went to that manually, so let's try going to that manually and see if it gets to where we want to get to. All right, so we went there manually. Notice that we pre-populated the values. So we're updating event 7. So nap and get some sleep is already there. So let's say get a lot of sleep is our update. If I hit submit, that's not an accurate message, but if I go back to my homepage, now it's get a lot of sleep. So the update is working. This link, this button is not working. The link should be correct. Okay, it's working now. So I think I just didn't refresh properly. So I changed it. If you guys are following along, in my detail page, I added a button right here. That's a link. I used a relative path, so that just made it easier. I guess when I was trying to hard code it, for whatever reason, it was not going to the right place. But now I just pass it the route name, pass it the value I need. In this case, this route, the event ID. So when I click on that button here, should get them to an update form. When I submit, nap a lot, submit, I go back to that URL, nap a lot. So that got updated. Notice that my timestamps are not updating because that's only when they get created. Do they update? Any questions? Sorry for that detour. Jinja is, syntax for Jinja is not always easiest. There are ways to do ternaries because I've definitely done them before. So might require some more Googling on my end. Questions about update? All right, so we can condense some of this code. So again, looking at this code, very similar between, let me get more space here. Yeah, this code is very similar. So I might want to break it out into a shared method. So I do def event form. We can do some logic here. So looking at this, this is different. So in one case we have a new event, the other case we don't. So let's say pass in existing events. Let's just say event. Here, we get an update there. So I could take all of this, put this in my new method. Again, I'm just trying to reduce the redundant code. So if I get rid of all this, I could say new event equals events. And then I could call, what do they call it? Process event form. Any questions? I feel like, again, probably did a lot there and might have done stuff to detract from our main point here, but can call process form with new events. And let's say true. What else do I want to do here? So our data is going to be based on create or update. That goes there. This can be, because I can just be events. And we want to render the same thing. Something like that. So we need to pass in a request also. All right, so just trying to clean up my code. Not super important. You guys probably have experience cleaning up code, so hopefully I could get past this point. So process form. request. We don't need this. All right, so new event, we just create a new event in the update, we get that, and essentially we do the same thing for both. So in this case, I call process form, I pass it a value of false. So for my update case, I would do something different. This would be update events, and I don't need this stuff here. Questions, what questions you guys have? Please, please, please do ask. Any confusion I cause, chaos, mental stress I've caused in the last half hour?
You can be able to post these videos during the lunch break so that we can review them after lunch.
Absolutely. We'll try my best to get them up as soon as I can. All right, so now let's look at what we have. So we're doing the same thing. If we post, we grab the event name, add it to our description, or name and description, save it. So yeah, everything here is the same. Maybe add a ternary here. So if create or update, else updated events. So now we have an accurate message. Okay, so we could show something conditionally based on that. I think that should take care of it. I probably have some error somewhere based on my guess here. Let's see, does this work? Didn't return HTTP response, so I need to return something. Oh, I need to return this. Always need to return something from your functions. Don't forget that. Return that stuff. So let's go here. Okay, so nap a lot this weekend. Copy description. Updated event. That looks cool. Go here. Yep, that works. So again, your code can be more condensed. So here we're using logic, so it's much more, I guess, proper coding. I don't repeat myself as much as I can. Again, my template, not the best. My form here, kind of chunky. This can be condensed if you look into Jinja a little bit more. So I'll leave that as a DIY project if you guys kind of want to read Jinja docs yourself. Alrighty, so that kind of takes care of our CRUD operations except for deletes. So if you want to quickly do delete just for that experience, let's quickly do that in the next 5 minutes and we'll take a break. So let's do delete. So define events, delete, fix and request. All we want to do is delete an event. So let's do events equals event dot objects dot get pk equals event ID. That's something we'll pass in here. Event ID. If events, then event dot delete. Is that what I want to do? Okay, save that. Else show all right, so these error cases, if you want to try those out, I'm going to add a URL here. So I'll take my update path, kind of duplicate it for delete. So we go to /delete for an event. That should delete it. And that should take care of all of our CRUD operations. All right, so add my comma there, save that. Okay, looks like my server is good. Delete should navigate to event delete, which simply will delete it from database. So let's return something, event removed. All right, so probably add a button for that. So if I go back to my detail form, let's add a button for delete. Copy my link there. Let's say it's going to be delete, again, using relative paths. And I want to say delete events. All right, so delete, not too much effort. If I do this, click delete, event removed. So that was my, I think, nap event. We go back here. Yep, that nap event is no longer present. If I try to delete something that doesn't exist, let's go to event like 99, which doesn't exist. I should see an error. That's even worse. Does not exist. So back to my view. So try to fetch something that didn't exist here. So one way around that is let's add a try catch or try accept. And then accept, we go there. All right, so good to have saved code. So in this case, if you pass in an ID that doesn't exist, the accept should catch that. We should do the same up here with update event. So try doing this. Otherwise, show something like all right, so I always want to just predict your users rather than having your application kind of throw its hands up and say, I don't know what's going on. So try this again. Event does not exist. Try to update, same thing should happen. Event does not exist with an S, because I can't type. Okay, you guys get the idea. Kind of wrapping this up, definitely a long review, but I think it's good to kind of go over a CRUD operation, especially since we had that week break. Setting up a Django project, creating all the URLs, and then adding in the CRUD capabilities. What questions do you guys have before we take a break? No questions? You sure? Okay, a lot to digest. Just get more practice with doing the CRUD operations. So we still have some new material for today's lecture. It's not a lot, but I do want to go over using Django model forms. I know we're approaching lunchtime, so I'm probably gonna ask, let's do a lecture after lunch, so you guys have a full lunch break. We're just gonna go over using model forms, which is just a lot easier than doing what we're doing here. So Django just, again, does the hard work for you. So this is the more manual way to do it. There's an easier way to do it. So we'll go over that after lunch, and then cover also using templates in Django, like HTML templates within our templates, I guess, and make sure that you guys kind of can get comfortable with creating CRUD capabilities. All right, so last request for questions. Otherwise, we can take a break, have a full lunch break, and we'll continue our lecture or new material for today at 1 o'clock today. Sound good? All right, don't worry, the lecture won't be too long after lunch, so we'll get you guys coding shortly after that. All right, so take a lunch break. Let's get together. Let's start a little early. So let's say at 12:45, if you guys can get back, assuming that's not a problem for anyone. Let's continue our lecture at 12:45, and we'll cover the new topics for today. All right, guys, see you guys in a bit.
Awesome. See you guys in a bit.